There exists a book that was almost lost to history, a text so controversial, so filled with disturbing revelations, that religious authorities debated for centuries whether it should even be preserved. This is the Book of Enoch, and what it reveals about the origins of evil, the rebellion of angels, and the fate of humanity challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Enoch was not a king. He was not a warrior. He was simply a man who walked with God. Genesis chapter 5, verse 24 tells us something extraordinary. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Unlike every other person in that genealogy, Enoch did not die. He was taken. But where and why? The Book of Enoch claims to answer these questions with accounts so detailed, so specific, that scholars still debate their origins today. What Enoch witnessed changed him forever. He saw things that no mortal was meant to see. He traveled to places beyond the edge of the known world. He stood in the throne room of the Almighty and heard judgments pronounced against beings that once served in heaven. The knowledge he brought back was so dangerous that it was hidden, passed down through generations in whispers and fragments, until finally it was written down in the ancient texts we possess today. The book opens with a blessing, but not for everyone. It is a blessing for the righteous and the elect, those who would be alive in the days of tribulation when all the wicked would be removed from the earth. Enoch describes a vision he received, not about his own generation, but about a distant future. He speaks of a time when the Holy One would descend from heaven with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment on all people, to convict the ungodly of their deeds, and to destroy those who had opposed him. This raises an immediate question. What had humanity done to deserve such judgment? What corruption had spread so completely that divine intervention became necessary? The answer lies in an event that occurred in the days before the Great Flood, an event that Genesis mentions briefly but the Book of Enoch describes in shocking detail. It is the story of the Watchers. The Watchers were angels, not ordinary angels, but powerful beings assigned to watch over humanity. Their task was to guide, to protect, to observe, but something went terribly wrong. These angels looked down from their heavenly stations and saw the daughters of men. They saw beauty, they felt desire, and they made a choice that would corrupt the entire world. Scripture hints at this event in Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4, when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. But who were these sons of God? Traditional interpretation suggests they were fallen angels, divine beings who abandoned their posts in heaven. The Book of Enoch expands this narrative into a full account of cosmic rebellion, forbidden knowledge, and a birth of monsters that walks the earth. Scholars have wrestled with this text for millennia. Some embrace it as inspired scripture. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church includes it in their biblical canon to this day. Early church fathers like Tertullian and Origen quoted from it extensively. The New Testament book of Jude even references Enoch directly, citing his prophecy about the Lord coming with thousands of his holy ones. Yet other religious authorities rejected the Book of Enoch, calling it pseudepigrapha, a text falsely attributed to a biblical figure. Why the controversy? Perhaps because the Book of Enoch reveals uncomfortable truths. It describes a universe where angels can fall, where evil has supernatural origins, and where humanity's corruption was not entirely its own fault. It speaks of secrets that were never meant to be shared, knowledge that was stolen from heaven and given to mankind with devastating consequences. If you have ever wondered where evil truly comes from, if you have questioned why ancient mythologies around the world speak of gods descending to earth and producing hybrid offspring, if you have pondered the strange verse in Genesis about Nephilim and sons of God, then the Book of Enoch offers answers that are as troubling as they are fascinating. Subscribe now, because what we are about to uncover will challenge everything you think you know about the origins of wickedness and the hidden history of our world. The journey into Enoch's visions has only just begun, and the deeper we go, the more astonishing the revelations become. Enoch did not seek this knowledge. It was thrust upon him. He was chosen to be the scribe of righteousness, the one who would record the testimony of heaven against the rebellious angels. His mission was clear: write down what you see, preserve it for future generations, and warn humanity about what is coming. But before Enoch could fulfill this calling, he needed to understand the full scope of the rebellion. He needed to see where it started, how it spread, and what consequences it brought upon the world. The angels who guided him through these visions showed him everything. They revealed the names of the fallen angels, the forbidden arts they taught to humans, and the terrible fate awaiting them. The first thing Enoch learned was that the rebellion was not spontaneous, it was planned. The Watchers made a pact among themselves, binding their fate together with an oath. They knew what they were about to do was wrong. They understood that consequences would follow. Yet they proceeded anyway, driven by desires that overpowered their loyalty to the Creator. 200 angels descended to Mount Hermon. The very name Hermon comes from the Hebrew word for curse, because it was there that the angels bound themselves with curses, swearing not to turn back from their plan. This was not a moment of weakness. It was a deliberate, coordinated rebellion. What drove them to this? The Book of Enoch does not provide a psychological profile of angelic temptation, but it does make clear that the beauty of human women was the catalyst. These were beings who had lived in the presence of God, who had witnessed the creation of the universe, who had sung praises in the heavenly courts. Yet when they looked upon humanity, they were overcome with desire for something they were never meant to have. Some theologians argue this was about more than lust. It was about envy. Angels, though powerful, do not reproduce. They do not experience the continuation of themselves through offspring. Humans, made in the image of God, were given this gift. Perhaps the Watchers wanted to experience what it meant to be creators, to have children, to leave a legacy. If this is true, then their sin was not just disobedience, but a fundamental rejection of their own nature. The consequences of their choice were catastrophic. When angels and humans produced offspring, the result was not merely unusual, it was monstrous. The children born from these unions were the Nephilim, giants of immense size and strength, beings that did not fit into the natural order of creation. These hybrids had appetites that could not be satisfied. They consumed everything in their path, and when resources ran out, they turned on each other and on humanity itself. But the Nephilim were only one part of the problem. The fallen angels did something even more dangerous. They began to teach. They revealed secrets that heaven had kept hidden, knowledge that humanity was not ready to handle. They taught the making of weapons, the art of war, the use of cosmetics and enchantments, the reading of omens and the movements of stars. These teachings corrupted human society from within, turning people away from God and toward practices that the Creator had forbidden. Like this video if you are beginning to see why this text was so controversial. Comment below with your thoughts on whether angels truly rebelled, or if this story represents something else entirely. The debate has raged for thousands of years, and your perspective matters in this ongoing conversation. The corruption spread like a plague. Humanity, given knowledge it was never meant to possess, used it for violence, vanity, and idolatry. The earth became filled with wickedness, blood was shed without cause, justice was forgotten, and the cries of the innocent reached the ears of the Almighty. Heaven could no longer remain silent. The archangels, those who had remained faithful, looked down and saw the devastation. They heard the prayers of the oppressed. They witnessed the abominations walking the earth, and they brought the matter before the throne of God. What happened next would determine the fate of the world. The judgment pronounced in heaven would cleanse the earth, but at a terrible cost. The story of Enoch is not just about the past, it is a warning about the future, about what happens when boundaries are crossed and when beings, whether angelic or human, reach for power they were never meant to hold. The question that haunts every reader of the Book of Enoch is this: if such a rebellion happened once, could it happen again? And if the knowledge taught by the fallen angels was so dangerous, why does it still exist in the world today? These are not easy questions, and the answers Enoch provides are both comforting and deeply unsettling. We stand at the threshold of a story that has shaped religious thought for over 2,000 years. Ahead of us lies a journey through the heavens, into the abyss, and across the timeline of human history. Enoch will be our guide, but the revelations he shares will test everything we believe about good and evil, free will and destiny, judgment and mercy. Chapter 2. The Descent of the Watchers. Before the rebellion, the Watchers were holy. They were among the most powerful angels in heaven, entrusted with a sacred duty. Their name reflects their purpose. They were to watch over humanity, to observe the unfolding of God's plan, to guard and guide the children of Adam. But watching was not enough for them. They wanted more. The Book of Enoch names the leaders of this rebellion. Samiezer, their chief, led the conspiracy. Alongside him were Azazel, Ramiel, Cogabeel, Tamiel, and nearly 200 others. Each name is recorded, each one accountable for the choice they made. This was not a nameless horde of rebels. These were individuals, beings with identities and roles, who consciously abandoned their posts. Samiezer understood the gravity of what they were planning. According to the text, he hesitated. He feared that he alone would bear the guilt if the others changed their minds. So he demanded that they all swear an oath, binding themselves together in this act of defiance. They agreed. On Mount Hermon, they made their pact, cursing themselves if they turned back. The decision was final. Why Mount Hermon? This mountain sits at the northern boundary of ancient Israel, a place where later cultures would build shrines to pagan gods. Some researchers believe the location was symbolic, a high place where heaven and earth seemed to meet. Others suggest it was chosen for its remoteness, far from the centers of human civilization where their descent might be noticed too quickly. Whatever the reason, Mount Hermon became the site of one of the most consequential events in the spiritual history of the world. The angels descended. They took on physical forms capable of interacting with the material world in ways they had not done before. They walked among humans not as messengers or guardians, but as beings seeking their own fulfillment. They chose wives from among the daughters of men. They entered into unions that were never meant to be. Genesis hints at this event, but the Book of Enoch describes it in vivid detail. The Watchers did not simply appear and disappear. They lived among humans. They established relationships. They taught and influenced and ultimately corrupted. Their presence changed everything. The women they chose bore children, but these were not ordinary children. The offspring of angels and humans were giants, beings of enormous stature and strength. The Book of Enoch describes some of them as reaching 300 cubits in height. If a cubit is roughly 18 inches, that would make these creatures over 400 feet tall. Scholars debate whether this measurement is literal or symbolic, but the point is clear. These beings were unnatural, far beyond the scale of normal humanity. The Nephilim had appetites to match their size. They consumed everything: the crops, the livestock, the resources of entire communities. Humans could not sustain them, and when the food ran out, the Nephilim turned violent. They began to devour people. They attacked animals, each other, anything that could satisfy their endless hunger. The world became a nightmare, but the physical destruction caused by the Nephilim was only part of the catastrophe. The fallen angels themselves brought corruption of a different kind. They began to teach. Azazel, one of the chief rebels, taught humanity the art of metalworking. He showed them how to forge swords and knives, shields and armor. Before this, humans had tools for farming and building, but now they had weapons designed for killing. Warfare escalated, violence spread, blood flowed across the earth. He also taught the use of cosmetics and adornments. He revealed how to use antimony for eye makeup, how to craft jewelry, how to beautify the body. This might seem harmless, But the text suggests these teachings encouraged vanity and immorality. People became obsessed with appearance, with seduction, with using beauty as a tool for manipulation. Other fallen angels taught different secrets. Samyaza taught enchantments and the use of roots for magical purposes. Armoros taught how to break spells. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabeel revealed the movements of the stars and constellations. Ezekiel showed how to interpret the clouds. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel explained the patterns of the sun, and Sariel taught the cycles of the moon. These were not neutral pieces of information. They were secrets of creation, knowledge that belonged to heaven. By revealing them, the Watchers gave humanity access to powers and understandings that were never intended for mortal minds. People began to practice divination, to seek forbidden knowledge, to manipulate the natural world through occult means. The order of creation was disrupted. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, because the lessons it contains are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. The question of forbidden knowledge, of boundaries that should not be crossed, echoes through every generation. The corruption was complete. Humanity, once innocent, now possessed knowledge that led them into deeper and deeper sin. They turned away from the Creator and toward practices that defiled them. The earth, once blessed, became a place of violence and abomination, and the cries of the oppressed reached heaven. 4 archangels heard those cries. Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from their stations and saw the bloodshed, the suffering, the perversion of everything God had made. They saw the Nephilim devouring humanity. They saw the Watchers teaching forbidden arts. They saw the earth groaning under the weight of corruption. The archangels brought the matter before the throne of the Most High. They said, "You are the Lord of Lords, the God of Gods, the King of Kings. You see everything. Nothing is hidden from you. You have seen what Azazel has done, how he has taught injustice and revealed the eternal secrets of heaven. You have seen Samyaza and those with him, how they have defiled themselves with the daughters of men and produced offspring that fill the earth with violence. The souls of those who have died cry out to you for justice. The scene is remarkable. Even the archangels, powerful as they are, do not act on their own authority. They present the case and wait for the judgment of the Almighty. This reveals something crucial about the nature of divine justice. It is not impulsive. It is not arbitrary. Even when faced with overwhelming evil, heaven follows a process. The accused are known. The crimes are documented. The judgment is measured. And then the Most High spoke. His first command was to Uriel. Go to Noah, son of Lamech. Tell him to hide himself, for the end is coming. A flood will cover the earth and destroy everything on it. Instruct him on what he must do to preserve his life and save a remnant for future generations. The flood was not a random act of divine anger. It was a response to a specific crisis. The world had become so corrupted by the presence of the Nephilim and the teachings of the Watchers that it could not continue. The only solution was to cleanse the earth and start again with a righteous remnant. The second command was to Raphael. Bind Azazel's hand and foot. Cast him into the darkness. Find the desert of Dudail and throw him into it. Cover him with rough stones and leave him in darkness until the day of judgment, when he will be cast into the fire. Heal the earth that has been corrupted. Announce that I will restore it. Azazel's punishment was immediate and severe. He was not simply rebuked or cast out. He was imprisoned, bound in a desolate place, left in utter darkness. His fate was sealed. On the final day, he would be thrown into eternal fire. But in the meantime, the earth needed healing. Raphael, whose name means God heals, was tasked with the restoration. The third command was to Gabriel. Go to the Nephilim, the children of fornication. Destroy them. Send them against one another so that they kill each other in battle. They will not live long. Their fathers, the Watchers, have no right to ask for mercy on their behalf. The Nephilim were not given a chance to repent. They were abominations, beings that should never have existed. Heaven's judgment against them was total. They would destroy each other, and no length of days would be granted to them. The fourth command was to Michael, "Go to Samyaza and the others who have defiled themselves. Bind them for 70 generations beneath the earth until the day of judgment. When that day comes, they will be led to the abyss of fire and imprisoned forever." 70 generations. The Watchers would remain bound in darkness for an unimaginable span of time, fully conscious of their fate, waiting for the final judgment when they would be thrown into the eternal prison. Their rebellion had consequences that would stretch across centuries. Comment below if you think the punishment was just. Were the Watchers victims of their own desires, or did they deserve eternal condemnation? This question has sparked theological debates for thousands of years, and there is no easy answer. The judgment was pronounced. The archangels went forth to execute it. But before the flood came, before the world was cleansed, Enoch himself would be drawn into the unfolding drama. He would become the mediator between the condemned Watchers and the throne of heaven. And what he would witness next would reveal truths about justice, mercy, and the nature of divine law that resonate to this very day. Chapter 3. The Birth of the Nephilim. The children born to the Watchers and the daughters of men were unlike anything the world had ever seen. They were not fully human. They were not fully angelic. They were something in between, and that made them monstrous. The Book of Enoch describes their size in staggering terms. Some grew to 300 cubits, a height that defies natural law. Even if we interpret this symbolically, the message is clear. These beings were giants, far beyond the scale of ordinary people. They towered over cities. They cast shadows that covered fields. Their footsteps shook the ground, but size was not their only characteristic. The Nephilim possessed strength that came from their angelic heritage. They could tear apart structures with their bare hands. They could lift boulders that teams of men could not move. They were, in every sense, superhuman, and they used that power without restraint. At first, the Nephilim consumed the produce of the land. The harvests that were meant to feed entire communities disappeared into their mouths in a single meal. Livestock that farmers had raised for years were devoured in moments. Grain stores that should have lasted through the winter were emptied in days. The humans who lived near the Nephilim were left with nothing. When the resources ran out, the Nephilim did not starve. They adapted. They began to hunt. Not animals, humans. The Book of Enoch states plainly that they devoured mankind. What was once unthinkable became commonplace. People lived in terror, hiding from creatures that saw them as nothing more than food. The Nephilim also turned on the natural world. They sinned against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. The text does not elaborate on what this means, but scholars suggest it involved genetic manipulation or other perversions of the natural order. The fallen angels had taught forbidden knowledge, and their offspring may have used that knowledge to further corrupt creation. Eventually, the Nephilim even turned on each other. When no other food source remained, they began to devour one another's flesh and drink blood. Cannibalism among giants. The image is horrifying, and it underscores how far the world had fallen from the paradise God intended. The earth itself cried out. This is a recurring theme in Scripture. When blood is shed unjustly, when corruption spreads unchecked, the very ground bears witness. In Genesis, after Cain killed Abel, God said, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Here, the entire earth was groaning under the weight of abomination. Why did God allow the Nephilim to exist at all? This is one of the most difficult questions raised by the Book of Enoch. If the Watchers' descent was a direct violation of divine law, why did their offspring survive long enough to wreak such havoc? Some theologians argue that God permits evil for a time to demonstrate the full consequences of rebellion. Others suggest that free will, even angelic free will, comes with the possibility of catastrophic choices. The text does not provide a definitive answer, but it does make clear that judgment, when it came, was absolute. The Nephilim were not the only problem. Their very existence destabilized human society. People who witnessed these giants walking the earth began to worship them. Ancient mythologies from cultures around the world speak of demigods, heroes of old, beings born from the union of gods and mortals. The Greeks had their Titans and their Heracles. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki. The Egyptians told of gods who took human form. Could these legends be distorted memories of the Nephilim? This is where the Book of Enoch intersects with history and archaeology in fascinating ways. Across the ancient world, we find stories that are strikingly similar. Divine beings descend, they mate with humans. Their children become mighty warriors or rulers. These stories were not borrowed from the Bible. Many of them predate the written text of Genesis, yet they share common elements. What if they are all describing the same event? Subscribe if this connection between ancient mythology and biblical text intrigues you, because the deeper we dig, the more these threads weave together into a picture that challenges conventional understanding. Some researchers have gone further, pointing to megalithic structures that ancient humans supposedly built with primitive tools. The massive stones of Baalbek in Lebanon, the precision of the Egyptian pyramids, the engineering marvels of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Could these be remnants of a time when beings of superhuman strength and knowledge walked the earth? The mainstream academic community dismisses such ideas, but the questions persist. The Book of Enoch does not claim that the Nephilim built these structures. It focuses on their violence and the corruption they spread. But it does establish that for a period of time, the world was home to beings far more powerful than ordinary humans. And if those beings possessed knowledge taught by fallen angels, knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and construction, then the possibility that they left a physical legacy becomes harder to dismiss entirely. Regardless of what archaeological evidence may or may not exist, the spiritual impact of the Nephilim is undeniable. Their presence forced humanity to confront a reality where the boundaries between the divine and the mortal had been shattered. People could no longer assume that the spiritual realm was separate and distant. Angels had descended, hybrids walked among them. The world was not what it seemed. This realization led to widespread idolatry. If angels could take physical form and produce offspring, then perhaps they could be worshipped. Perhaps they could be bargained with. Perhaps sacrifices and rituals could gain their favor. The worship of false gods, which would plague humanity for millennia, may have begun in this era as a direct response to the presence of the Nephilim and the Watchers. The fallen angels encouraged this. They accepted worship. They positioned themselves as gods. They established cults and practices that drew people further from the Creator. Azazel's teachings of cosmetics and adornments were not just about vanity. They were about creating a culture of seduction and manipulation where appearance and ritual replaced genuine righteousness. The corruption was total. Violence, idolatry, forbidden knowledge, genetic abomination. Every aspect of human life had been poisoned. The world that God had called good had become a nightmare, and still, the Nephilim multiplied. Still, the Watchers taught their secrets. Still, the bloodshed continued. Heaven watched. The archangels reported. The cries of the innocent reached the throne, and a decision was made. The world would be cleansed. But not yet. First, there was something that needed to happen. A witness needed to be called. A scribe needed to be appointed. A record needed to be made. That scribe was Enoch. Enoch had lived righteously in a world gone mad. He had not participated in the corruption. He had not sought the forbidden knowledge. He had walked with God. And because of this, he was chosen for a task unlike any other. He would be taken from the earth and shown the truth. He would witness the heavens and the abyss. He would stand before the throne of the Most High, and he would carry a message to the fallen Watchers. But before Enoch could fulfill this mission, he needed to understand what had happened. He needed to see the Nephilim with his own eyes. He needed to comprehend the full scope of the disaster. Only then could he serve as an effective witness to future generations. Like this video, if the story of the Nephilim raises more questions than it answers. The mystery of these beings has fascinated scholars, theologians, and researchers for centuries. Some see them as literal giants, others interpret them as symbolic representations of human tyranny. Still others believe they were real, but that their size has been exaggerated in the retelling. What do you think? The fate of the Nephilim was sealed before they even knew it. Heaven's judgment was already pronounced. Gabriel had been dispatched to destroy them. They would be turned against each other, their immense strength used to tear themselves apart, but their physical destruction would not be the end of their story. Something far more disturbing awaited them. Their bodies would die, but their spirits would remain, and those spirits would haunt the earth, causing trouble for generations to come. That revelation would come later, shown to Enoch in visions that would chill him to his core. Chapter 4. The co-eruption of Mank meaned the Watchers and the Nephilim brought violence, but they also brought something more insidious. They brought knowledge, and in the wrong hands, knowledge became a weapon more dangerous than any sword. Azazel stands out among the fallen angels as the primary teacher of forbidden arts. His name appears repeatedly in ancient texts, sometimes spelled Azazel, other times Azazel, other times Azael or Asel. In later Jewish tradition, he becomes associated with the scapegoat ritual on the Day of Atonement, the goat sent into the wilderness carrying the sins of the people. The connection is no coincidence. Azazel's teachings corrupted humanity so thoroughly that he became a symbol of sin itself. What exactly did he teach? The Book of Enoch provides a detailed list. He revealed the secrets of metalworking, showing humans how to extract ore from the earth and forge it into tools and weapons. This might seem like a gift. After all, metalworking advanced civilization. But the text emphasizes that Azazel taught humans to make instruments of war: swords, knives, shields, breastplates. The focus was on violence. Before the Watchers descended, human conflict was limited. People might fight with sticks and stones, but organized warfare as we know it did not exist. Azazel changed that. He gave humanity the means to kill efficiently, to organize armies, to conquer and oppress. The result was predictable. Warfare spread. Blood flowed. The strong dominated the weak, and the earth was filled with violence. But Azazel's teachings went beyond weapons. He also revealed the use of antimony for eye makeup, the art of beautifying the eyelids, the crafting of jewelry and ornaments, and the use of dyes. These seem trivial compared to weapons, but the text treats them as equally corrupting. Why? Because they encouraged vanity, seduction, and the prioritization of outward appearance over inner righteousness. People became obsessed with how they looked, using beauty as a tool to manipulate and deceive. Sexual immorality increased. Marriages were undermined. Society fractured. The other fallen angels contributed their own forbidden knowledge. Samyaza taught enchantments and the cutting of roots for magical purposes. This was sorcery, the manipulation of spiritual forces through rituals and incantations. People began to seek power through magic rather than through obedience to God. They called on spirits, made offerings to demons, and dabbled in practices that opened doors to darker realms. Amaros taught the resolving of enchantments, essentially counter-magic. If someone placed a curse on you, Amaros's teachings could break it. This sounds helpful, but it perpetuated the cycle. Magic and counter-magic became part of daily life. People relied on supernatural manipulation rather than seeking divine intervention or living justly. Barakiel taught astrology, the belief that the stars and planets influence human destiny. Kokabiel expanded on this, teaching the constellations and their supposed meanings. Astrology has persisted throughout human history, embedded in cultures worldwide. But the Book of Enoch presents it as a corruption, a way of seeking knowledge about the future without trusting the Creator. Instead of praying and seeking God's guidance, people looked to the heavens and tried to read fate in the movement of celestial bodies. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of clouds, essentially weather prediction and divination based on atmospheric signs. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth. geomancy, interpreting cracks in the ground, patterns in soil, omens from the natural world. Shansiel taught the signs of the sun, and Sariel taught the course of the moon. All of this knowledge, while seemingly practical, was presented as forbidden because it bypassed reliance on God. Humans were meant to trust the Creator for provision, guidance, and understanding. The fallen angels offered shortcuts, but those shortcuts led people away from righteousness. Share this with someone who has questioned where ancient occult practices originated. The Book of Enoch provides an answer that is both specific and unsettling. These were not human inventions. They were taught by rebellious angels who wanted to disrupt the relationship between God and humanity. The cumulative effect of this forbidden knowledge was devastating. Humanity, once dependent on God, now believed it could control its own destiny through magic, warfare, astrology, and manipulation. People turned away from worship and prayer. They built altars to the Watchers, treating them as gods. They performed rituals taught by the fallen angels, sacrificing animals and even humans to gain favor or power. The social order collapsed. With weapons widely available, violence became the norm. Warlords arose, using their knowledge of metallurgy to arm followers and conquer neighbors. Women were abducted and enslaved. Children were born into a world where might made right and where the teachings of the Watchers were accepted as truth. Sexual immorality exploded. The unions between the Watchers and human women had already shattered the boundaries of what was natural. Now, with the spread of cosmetics, adornments, and seduction techniques, people pursued physical pleasure without regard for covenant or commitment. Marriages meant nothing. Faithfulness was mocked. The family structure, which God had designed as the foundation of human society, was torn apart. Idolatry became universal. The Watchers themselves were worshipped. Their Nephilim offspring were revered as heroes and demigods. Shrines were built on high places. Rituals involving blood and fire became common. People believed that by performing the right incantations or sacrifices, they could gain the favor of these powerful beings. The worship of the true Creator was abandoned. Even the natural world suffered. The Nephilim's predation on animals and humans disrupted ecosystems. The occult practices taught by the Watchers led to environmental desecration. Sacred groves were used for dark rituals. Blood soaked the ground. The earth itself became polluted, not just physically, but spiritually. The Book of Enoch makes a crucial claim. All of this corruption, all of this violence and immorality, all of this suffering can be traced back to the teachings of the Watchers. Humanity's fall was not entirely its own fault. Yes, people made choices. Yes, they sinned. But they were led astray by beings far more powerful and knowledgeable than themselves. The Watchers exploited human weakness, offering forbidden knowledge that seemed appealing but ultimately led to destruction. This raises profound theological questions. To what extent is humanity responsible for its own corruption? If we were deceived by supernatural beings, does that mitigate our guilt? The Book of Enoch does not absolve humanity. People still made choices. They still embraced the teachings they should have rejected. But it does provide context. The world was not simply failing on its own. It was being actively corrupted by rebellious angels. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you believe fallen angels still influence humanity today? Are the occult practices that persist in modern times remnants of the knowledge taught by the Watchers? This is not an abstract question. It touches on how we understand the nature of evil in our world. The archangels witnessed all of this. They saw humanity spiraling into chaos. They heard the cries of the innocent, and they brought their report to the Most High. The judgment was pronounced. The flood would come. The Watchers would be bound. The Nephilim would be destroyed. But first, a scribe needed to be appointed. A record needed to be made. The story needed to be preserved so that future generations would know what happened and why. That scribe was Enoch, and his journey was about to begin. Chapter 5. E and Oshi Divine summons. Enoch was a righteous man in an age of corruption. While the world around him descended into chaos, he remained faithful. The Bible tells us simply that Enoch walked with God. But what does that mean? In a world where fallen angels taught sorcery, where giants devoured people, where violence and idolatry were everywhere, how did one man remain righteous? The Book of Enoch does not detail Enoch's daily life before his calling, but it emphasizes his unique status. He was the seventh generation from Adam, a number that carries symbolic weight in biblical numerology. 7 represents completeness, perfection. Enoch's position in the genealogy was not accidental. He was chosen before he was born. Enoch did not seek visions. He did not ask to see the heavens or to stand before the throne of God. He simply walked faithfully, day by day, in a world that had turned its back on the Creator. And because of this faithfulness, God chose him for a task that no other human had been given. He would be the scribe of righteousness, the witness who would document the rebellion of the Watchers and the judgment of heaven. The calling came suddenly. Enoch was taken from among the children of men. Angels appeared and led him to a remote place. They did not explain at first what was happening. They simply said, "Come." And Enoch, trusting the God he had walked with, followed. The angels led him to a high place far from human habitation. There they spoke to him directly. "Enoch, scribe of righteousness, you have been chosen to carry a message. Go to the Watchers of heaven who have left their station and defiled themselves with the daughters of men. Tell them that they will have no peace, no forgiveness. Tell them that judgment has been pronounced." Enoch must have been terrified. These were not ordinary angels he was being sent to confront. These were powerful beings who had rebelled against God, who had corrupted the world, who commanded the loyalty of the Nephilim. What could one man say to them? How could he deliver a message of judgment to beings who could destroy him with a thought? But Enoch was not given a choice. The calling was clear. He was to be the messenger, the one who would stand between heaven and the fallen Watchers, delivering the verdict that had been pronounced. Before he could fulfill this mission, Enoch needed to understand what had happened. The angels who guided him began to reveal the full scope of the rebellion. They showed him visions of the descent of the Watchers, the birth of the Nephilim, the teaching of forbidden knowledge. They explained that the corruption of the world was not random. It was the direct result of angelic disobedience. Enoch listened. He absorbed the information, and he began to grasp the magnitude of what was at stake. This was not just about punishing a few rebellious angels. It was about the fate of creation itself. If the corruption continued unchecked, humanity would be destroyed. The earth would become uninhabitable. Everything God had made would be undone. The angels also explained the judgment that was coming. A great flood would cover the earth, wiping out the Nephilim and the wicked humans who had followed the teachings of the Watchers. Only a remnant would survive, a righteous man and his family who would be preserved to repopulate the world. That man was Noah, Enoch's own descendant. Enoch was being given a glimpse into the future, a preview of the judgment that would soon unfold. But first, he had a task to complete. He had to deliver the message to the Watchers, and he had to do it knowing that they would not receive it well. Like this video if you admire Enoch's courage. To stand before rebellious angels and pronounce their doom required a level of faith that few possess. Enoch did not have an army. He did not have supernatural power. He had only his faithfulness and the authority of the message he carried. The angels transported Enoch to the place where the Watchers were gathered. This was not Mount Hermon, where they had descended. It was a place called Ubel-Meyin, somewhere between Lebanon and Syria. The Watchers were assembled there, perhaps knowing that judgment was imminent, perhaps hoping that they could find a way to avert it. When Enoch arrived, the Watchers saw him. They knew who he was. They understood why he had come, and they were afraid. Despite their power, despite their knowledge, despite their rebellion, they feared the judgment of the Most High. They covered their faces in shame, unable to meet Enoch's eyes. Enoch spoke. he delivered the message that the angels had given him. You have defiled yourselves with the daughters of men. You have taken wives and produced offspring that were never meant to exist. You have taught forbidden knowledge and corrupted the earth. Because of this, you will have no peace. You will have no forgiveness. Judgment has been pronounced and it will be carried out. The watchers trembled. They had known this day would come, but hearing the pronouncement made it real. They realized that their rebellion had consequences they could not escape, and in their desperation they did something unexpected. They asked Enoch to intercede for them. Enoch, they said, you are a righteous man. You have found favor with the Most High. Write a petition on our behalf. Plead for mercy. Ask that our punishment be lightened. We cannot approach God ourselves. We cannot lift our eyes to heaven. But perhaps he will listen to you. Enoch faced a dilemma. These beings had corrupted the world. They had caused untold suffering. They deserved the judgment pronounced against them. But they were still created beings, still capable of feeling fear and regret. Should he advocate for them? Could he subscribe now? Because what Enoch chose to do next reveals profound truths about justice, mercy, and the limits of intercession. His response would shape not only the fate of the Watchers, but also his own understanding of divine law. Enoch agreed to write the petition, not because he believed the Watchers deserved mercy, but because he was commanded to serve as a mediator. He would present their plea to the Most High and let God make the final decision. It was not his place to judge. He was simply the messenger, the scribe, who recorded both the sins and the pleas of the fallen. He wrote down their petition carefully, documenting their regret and their request for forgiveness, and then he prepared to carry it to heaven. This would not be a simple prayer offered from earth. Enoch would be taken into the presence of God himself, into the throne room of the Almighty, to present the case of the fallen Watchers. The journey ahead would change Enoch forever. He would see things no mortal had seen. He would stand where no human had stood, and he would learn that mercy, while abundant, has boundaries. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Some sins are so grave that forgiveness is not possible. Enoch's mission as a mediator was about to take him beyond the veil, into realms that exist outside of time and space, and what he would witness there would provide answers to questions that have haunted humanity since the beginning. What does the throne of God look like? What happens in the courts of heaven? And when angels fall? Is there any way back? Chapter 6. Journey beyond the Fiend stood at the threshold of the impossible. The angels who guided him prepared him for what was to come. You will be taken beyond the realm of mortals, they said. You will see the heavens as they truly are. You will stand before the throne of the Most High. Do not be afraid. Easy words to hear, harder to believe. Enoch was a man, limited by flesh and mortality. The heavens were the domain of the divine, places where no living human belonged. Yet here he was, about to cross a boundary that had never been crossed before. The ascent began. Enoch was lifted up, carried by the angels through layers of reality. The earth shrank below him. The sky opened. He passed through clouds, beyond the sun and moon, beyond the stars themselves. He entered realms that had no names, places that existed outside the physical creation. The Book of Enoch describes multiple heavens, each more glorious and terrifying than the last. The first heaven contained the atmospheric realm, the place of clouds and weather. The second held the stars and celestial bodies. But beyond these were higher heavens, realms of pure spirit, where the angels dwelled and where the throne of God resided. Enoch's first vision was of a heavenly ocean, waters that existed above the firmament. This was not water as we know it. It was something else, a substance that shimmered with light, alive with energy. The gates of heaven opened, and Enoch passed through. He found himself in a vast courtroom, a place of overwhelming grandeur. The floor was like crystal, transparent and glowing. The walls were made of living fire, flames that did not consume but radiated power, and at the center of it all was the throne, The throne of God is described in terms that defy comprehension. It was surrounded by fire, yet it was not consumed. Streams of flame poured from beneath it, rivers of light that flowed eternally. Thousands upon thousands of angels stood around the throne, singing praises, their voices blending into a single harmonious roar. Enoch fell to the ground, his face pressed against the crystalline floor. He could not look directly at the throne. The glory was too great, the presence too overwhelming. He was a mortal in the presence of the infinite, a creature of dust standing before the creator of all things. A voice spoke, not from the throne, but from an angel nearby. "Rise, Enoch. You have been summoned to present the petition of the Watchers. Speak." Enoch rose to his knees, trembling. He held the written petition in his hands, the plea for mercy that the fallen angels had begged him to present, and he began to read. "Most High, the Watchers who rebelled against you, who descended to earth and defiled themselves with the daughters of men, who taught forbidden knowledge and corrupted your creation, these Watchers have asked me to plead on their behalf. They acknowledge their sin, they recognize their guilt, and they ask for mercy, for forgiveness, for a lessening of the judgment pronounced against them." The words hung in the air. Silence filled the throne room. The angels stopped singing. The flames ceased their movement. It was as if all of creation held its breath, waiting for the response. And then the Most High spoke. The voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried authority that transcended sound, a presence that filled every corner of existence. Enoch felt the words not just in his ears but in his very soul. "Enoch, faithful servant, you have carried their petition. Now hear my judgment." The Watchers were holy. They were spiritual beings, living eternal lives in my presence. But they abandoned their station. They defiled themselves with mortal women, acting as though they were flesh. They have brought corruption upon the earth, teaching secrets that were never meant to be revealed. They have caused suffering, violence, and death. For them, there will be no peace. There will be no forgiveness. They will be bound in darkness for 70 generations, and then they will be cast into the abyss of fire, where they will remain forever. Their children, the Nephilim, will be destroyed. Their bodies will perish, but their spirits will remain on earth as evil entities, causing trouble until the end of time. As for humanity, those who have been corrupted will be cleansed by a great flood. Only the righteous will survive, a remnant through whom the earth will be repopulated and restored. The judgment was final. There was no room for negotiation, no possibility of appeal. The Watchers had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. They had corrupted the order of creation, and the consequences were irreversible. Enoch understood. He had fulfilled his duty by presenting the petition, but he had also known, deep down, that mercy was not possible in this case. The sin was too great. The damage was too severe. Justice demanded punishment, and the Most High would not compromise his righteousness. Comment below if you think divine justice is too harsh. This is a question that theologians have wrestled with for centuries. Does eternal punishment fit the crime? Can a loving God also be a God of absolute judgment? The Book of Enoch does not shy away from these difficult questions. It presents a picture of God as both merciful and just, but it makes clear that justice sometimes requires severe consequences. After the judgment was pronounced, the angels showed Enoch more of the heavens. They took him to places where secrets were kept, where the foundations of creation were laid, where the future was written. He saw the storehouses of the winds, chambers where the forces of nature were kept until they were needed. He saw the treasuries of snow and hail, the places where rain was held before it fell to earth. He understood that nothing in creation was random. Everything had a purpose, a place, a time appointed by the Most High. He saw the ends of the earth, the pillars upon which the world rested, the boundaries beyond which no living thing could pass. He saw the abyss, a dark chasm where the rebellious angels would be imprisoned. a place of fire and chains and eternal torment. The abyss was terrifying. Enoch looked into it and saw the future of the Watchers. They would be bound there, conscious and suffering, for 70 generations, and after that they would be cast into an even worse place, the lake of fire, where their torment would never end. But the visions were not all dark. Enoch was also shown the dwelling place of the righteous. He saw a garden of paradise, a place of light and peace where those who had remained faithful to God would live forever. Trees bearing fruit, rivers flowing with clear water, no pain, no suffering, only joy in the presence of the Most High. He saw the future kingdom, a time when the earth would be renewed, when righteousness would reign, when the wicked would be no more. He saw the Son of Man, a figure of glory and power who would judge all creation and establish an eternal kingdom of justice. Like this video, if the vision of paradise gives you hope, in the midst of judgment and darkness, the Book of Enoch also promises restoration. The righteous will be vindicated. The faithful will be rewarded. Evil will not have the final word. Enoch was shown the heavenly books, records where every deed of every person was written. He saw that nothing was hidden from the Most High. Every act of kindness, every sin, every word spoken, all of it was documented. On the day of judgment, these books would be opened, and each person would be judged according to what was written. This was not arbitrary judgment. It was based on evidence, on facts, on the choices people have made. The righteous, whose names were written in the book of life, would be welcomed into paradise. The wicked, whose deeds condemned them, would be cast into the abyss. The angels explained to Enoch that his role was to write all of this down, to create a record that future generations could read. He was to be the witness, the one who documented what happened when angels fell, when humanity was corrupted, and when God intervened to cleanse the earth. Enoch accepted this calling. He understood that the knowledge he had been given was both a privilege and a burden. He would carry the weight of these revelations for the rest of his life, knowing things that no other human knew, bearing a message that many would reject. But he was not finished. There was more to see, more to learn. The journey beyond the veil was only beginning. Enoch would witness the execution of judgment, the binding of the Watchers, the destruction of the Nephilim, and the preparation for the flood that would cleanse the earth. And through it all, he would write, preserving the truth for generations yet to come. Chapter 7. The fallen angels play Enoch's descended from the heavenly courts carrying a message he did not want to deliver. The Watchers had hoped for mercy. They had asked him to intercede. They had believed, perhaps naively, that their petition might soften the judgment. But the verdict from the Most High was absolute. No peace, no forgiveness, eternal punishment. The journey back to the place where the Watchers were gathered felt longer than the ascent to heaven. Enoch's heart was heavy. He was about to tell these powerful beings that their fate was sealed, that there was no hope, that the consequences of their rebellion would stretch into eternity. When he arrived at Ubel Mayan, the Watchers were waiting. They saw him approach, and their faces betrayed a mixture of hope and dread. They had spent the time since Enoch's departure in anxious anticipation. Perhaps God would show mercy. Perhaps the punishment would be lessened. Perhaps there was still a way out. Enoch looked at them. These were beings who had once stood in the presence of God, who had sung praises in the heavenly courts, who had been entrusted with watching over humanity. Now they stood before him as condemned criminals, awaiting a verdict they already knew in their hearts. He spoke, "I have carried your petition to the Most High. I have presented your plea for mercy, and I have received his judgment." The Watchers leaned forward, desperate to hear the response. "The Lord of Spirits has said that there will be no peace for you. You are holy, spiritual beings living eternal lives in his presence. But you defiled yourselves with the daughters of men. You acted as though you were mortal, abandoning the nature he gave you. You taught forbidden knowledge and corrupted the earth. Because of this, you will be bound in darkness for 70 generations. and after that you will be cast into the abyss of fire where you will remain forever." The words hit the watchers like a physical blow. Some of them cried out. Others fell to their knees. A few simply stared in silent despair, the reality of their fate sinking in. One of them, perhaps Samyaza, the leader, spoke. "Is there truly no mercy? We have seen what we have done. We understand the consequences. Can we not make amends? Can we not undo the damage?" Enoch shook his head. "The Most High has spoken. The judgment is final. You cannot undo what has been done. The Nephilim exist because of you. The corruption of humanity is your fault. The blood shed on the earth cries out for justice, and justice will be served." Another watcher, maybe Azazel, responded with anger. "We gave humanity knowledge. We taught them to forge metal, to understand the stars, to see beauty in the world. Are these crimes? Should humans have remained ignorant forever?" Enoch's voice was firm. "You gave humanity knowledge that was not meant for them. You taught them to make weapons so they could kill each other. You revealed secrets of heaven that were meant to remain hidden. You led them into sorcery, idolatry, and immorality. You did not elevate humanity. You did not elevate humanity. You corrupted it." The watchers had no response. They knew Enoch was right. They had rationalized their actions, convinced themselves that they were helping humanity, but the results spoke for themselves. The world was drowning in violence and sin. The Nephilim were devouring people. Humanity had turned away from God and toward the dark practices taught by the fallen angels. Share this video if you have ever wrestled with the question of forbidden knowledge. Is there such a thing as knowing too much? The story of the Watchers suggests that some knowledge comes with a price, that not all truths are meant to be universally accessible. One of the younger Watchers, one who perhaps had followed Samyaza's lead without fully understanding the consequences, asked quietly, "What will happen to our children?" Enoch's expression softened, but his words were still hard. "The Nephilim will be destroyed. They will turn on each other and kill one another. Their bodies will perish, but their spirits will remain on the earth as evil entities, causing trouble for humanity until the end of time." The Watchers groaned. Their offspring, the beings they had fathered, would not even find rest in death. They would become demons, wandering the earth, perpetuating the corruption their fathers had started. It was a legacy of horror. Azazel spoke again, his voice bitter. "So, we are to be bound in darkness for 70 generations, fully conscious, waiting for the day when we will be thrown into eternal fire, and our children will become demons. This is the justice of the Most High." Enoch did not flinch. "You were given everything. You stood in the presence of God. You were holy, powerful, entrusted with sacred duties, and you threw it all away for the sake of desire. You wanted what was not yours. You took it, and now you face the consequences. This is not cruelty. This is justice." The throne room of heaven had been overwhelming, but this moment was equally difficult. Enoch stood before beings who could have destroyed him, delivering a message of eternal condemnation. Yet they did not lash out. They did not attack. They simply accepted the verdict, knowing they had no power to change it. One by one, the Watchers fell silent. Their hope was gone. Their future was set. They would be bound, imprisoned in darkness for an unfathomable span of time, and when that time ended, they would be cast into the lake of fire where their suffering would continue forever. Enoch prepared to leave. There was nothing more to say. The judgment had been delivered. The Watchers would soon be taken by the archangels and imprisoned. His role as mediator was complete. But before he left, one of the Watchers called out to him, "Enoch, will humanity remember us? Will they know what we did, why we fell?" Enoch turned back. "I will write it all down. Your names, your deeds, your punishment. Future generations will know. They will understand what happens when boundaries are crossed, when beings, whether angelic or human, reach for what is forbidden. Your story will serve as a warning." And with that, Enoch departed. He did not look back. The execution of judgment came swiftly after that. The archangel Michael, commander of the heavenly hosts, descended with a company of angels. They seized Samyaza, Azazel, and the other leaders of the rebellion. The watchers did not resist. They allowed themselves to be bound with chains of darkness, knowing that resistance was futile. Raphael took Azazel to the desert of Dudael. There, he cast him into a pit, covered him with rough stones, and sealed him in darkness. Azazel would remain there, alone, cut off from light, until the day of final judgment. His screams echoed through the desolate place, but no one heard, no one came. He was forgotten by all except the angels who guarded his prison. Michael and the other archangels bound the remaining watchers and cast them into the depths of the earth. 70 generations. They would remain there, fully conscious, aware of their sin, tormented by the knowledge of what they had lost. And when those 70 generations passed, they would be brought out only to be thrown into the lake of fire. The judgment was thorough. The punishment was severe. But it was just. Comment below if you believe the punishment fits the crime. This is not an easy question. Eternal torment for a finite act of rebellion seems to human minds disproportionate. But the Book of Enoch presents the perspective of heaven. The Watchers were not ordinary beings. They were entrusted with sacred knowledge, given positions of authority, and granted access to the presence of God. Their betrayal was not a simple mistake. It was a calculated rejection of everything they were meant to be. Enoch returned to the world of men, carrying the weight of what he had seen. He had stood in the throne room of God. He had witnessed the judgment of angels. He had delivered a message of eternal condemnation. And now he had to live with that knowledge, knowing that the world was about to be cleansed by a flood, that the Nephilim would be destroyed, and that a new chapter in human history was about to begin. But before the flood, there was more for Enoch to see. The angels had only begun to reveal the secrets of creation. Ahead of him lay visions of the cosmos, of the future judgment, of the coming of the Son of Man, and of the ultimate restoration of all things. Enoch's journey was far from over. Chapter 8. Hechivan's judgment pronounced with the Watchers. Bound and Azazel imprisoned in the desert, heaven turned its attention to the earth. The angels had been dealt with, but their legacy remained. The Nephilim still walked the land, devouring and destroying. Humanity still practiced the forbidden arts taught by the Watchers. The corruption was deep, systemic, woven into the fabric of society. A surgical intervention would not be enough. The earth needed to be cleansed. The archangel Uriel was dispatched with a message for Noah, the great-grandson of Enoch. Noah was a righteous man, one of the few who had not participated in the corruption. He had not sought the forbidden knowledge. He had not worshipped the Watchers. He had remained faithful to the Creator, even when everyone around him turned away. Uriel appeared to Noah and spoke the words that would change everything. Noah, son of Lamech, hear the word of the Most High. The end is coming. A great flood will cover the earth and destroy all flesh. Every living thing that breathes will perish. But you have found favor in the eyes of the Lord. You will be saved along with your family. Build an ark according to the dimensions I will give you. Gather your wife, your sons, and their wives. Bring pairs of every kind of animal, bird, and creature that crawls on the ground. When the waters come, you and those with you will survive. Through you, the earth will be repopulated. Noah listened. The message was clear, but the implications were staggering. A flood that would cover the entire earth. The destruction of all living things. It was almost impossible to comprehend, but Noah did not question. He had walked with God, just as his great-grandfather Enoch had. And when God spoke, Noah obeyed. He began to build the ark. It was a massive project, a ship unlike anything the world had ever seen. People mocked him. They asked why he was building a boat on dry land. They laughed at his warnings about a coming flood. Rain was rare in that region. The idea of enough water to cover the earth seemed absurd, but Noah continued to build day after day, year after year, trusting that God's word was true. Meanwhile, the archangel Gabriel was given a different task. He was to go to the Nephilim and ensure their destruction. The command was specific: send them against each other. Let them fight until they have destroyed one another. Gabriel set to work. He stirred up conflicts among the Nephilim, turning their aggression inward. These beings, already violent and predatory, began to war against each other. Battles erupted across the land. Giants fought giants, their immense strength used to tear each other apart. The earth shook with the force of their combat. Blood flowed like rivers. The humans who witnessed these battles were terrified. They had lived in fear of the Nephilim for generations, but now they watched as the giants destroyed themselves. Some saw it as divine intervention. Others were simply relieved that the creatures that had hunted them were now focused on each other. One by one, the Nephilim fell. Their bodies, massive and seemingly indestructible, were torn apart in battle. They killed each other with a ferocity that matched their appetites, and as they died, something strange happened. Their spirits, the essence of what they were, did not depart to Sheol, the place where human spirits go. Instead, they remained on the earth. These spirits, born from the union of angels and humans, were not fully mortal. They could not simply cease to exist. They became disembodied entities, demons, wandering the earth and causing trouble for humanity. The Book of Enoch describes them as evil spirits that would afflict mankind until the end of time. This explains a great deal. If the Nephilim were destroyed in the flood, why do evil spirits still exist? The answer, according to Enoch, is that the spirits of the Nephilim survived the destruction of their bodies. They are the demons that torment humanity, the unseen forces that promote violence, immorality, and idolatry. They are the legacy of the Watcher's rebellion, a corruption that lingers even after the physical beings are gone. Like this video if this explanation of demons makes sense. The Book of Enoch provides a framework for understanding spiritual warfare that has influenced Christian theology for centuries. Demons are not just abstract symbols of evil, they are the remnants of a cosmic rebellion, entities with a history and a purpose. With the Nephilim destroying each other and the Watchers bound in darkness, heaven prepared for the final phase of judgment. The flood was coming. The waters that existed above the firmament, the heavenly ocean that Enoch had seen in his visions, would be released. The fountains of the deep, the subterranean waters beneath the earth, would burst forth. The two sources of water would combine, covering the entire world. The timing of the flood was deliberate. It would come after Noah had completed the ark, after he had gathered the animals, after the Nephilim had largely destroyed themselves. Everything was being orchestrated to ensure that the cleansing was thorough, but that a righteous remnant would survive. Enoch, though taken up to heaven before the flood, was shown visions of what would happen. He saw the dark clouds gathering, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. He saw people realizing too late that Noah had been right. He saw them pounding on the door of the ark, begging to be let in, but the door was sealed by God himself. No one else could enter. The waters rose, slowly at first, then faster. Rivers overflowed. Lakes expanded. The seas surged inland. Within days, the low-lying areas were submerged. Within weeks, entire cities were underwater. Within months, even the highest mountains were covered. Every living thing that breathed air perished. The Nephilim, already weakened by their battles, drowned. The humans who had practiced the forbidden arts, who had worshipped the Watchers, who had filled the earth with violence, all of them were swept away. Only the ark remained, floating on the surface of the waters, carrying the remnant that would repopulate the earth. Inside were Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. 8 people. 8 survivors out of a global population that may have numbered in the millions, and with them were the animals, preserved so that the earth could be replenished. The flood lasted for 40 days and nights. The waters remained for over a year before they began to recede. When the ark finally came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, Noah opened the door and looked out on a transformed world. The corruption was gone. The Nephilim were no more. The wicked had been judged. The earth was clean. Subscribe now if you want to continue exploring the mysteries revealed to Enoch. The story of the flood is only one chapter in a much larger narrative. Ahead lie visions of the future, revelations about the Son of Man, and prophecies concerning the final judgment. The Book of Enoch contains answers to questions that humanity has asked for millennia, and we are only beginning to uncover them. But the cleansing of the earth did not mean the end of evil. The spirits of the Nephilim still lingered. The knowledge taught by the Watchers had been passed down to Noah's descendants. The seeds of corruption remained, waiting to sprout again. The flood was a reset, but it was not a permanent solution. Humanity would struggle with sin, temptation, and rebellion for generations to come. This raises a profound question. If God could cleanse the earth once, why not do it again? Why allow evil to persist? The Book of Enoch does not provide a complete answer, but it hints at something important. The flood was a response to a specific crisis, the presence of the Nephilim and the corruption introduced by the Watchers. It was not meant to eliminate all evil. That would come later, at the final judgment, when the Son of Man would appear and establish an eternal kingdom of righteousness. Comment below with your thoughts on the purpose of the flood. Was it justice? Was it mercy? Was it a necessary reset to give humanity another chance? Theologians have debated this for thousands of years, and your perspective adds to the conversation. Heaven's judgment had been pronounced and executed. The Watchers were bound. The Nephilim were destroyed. The earth was cleansed by water. But the story was not over. Enoch's visions continued, revealing the mysteries of the cosmos, the fate of the righteous and the wicked, and the coming of a Savior who would one day judge all of creation. Chapter 9. The Secrets of the Cosmos. After witnessing the judgment of the Watchers and the vision of the coming flood, Enoch was taken on another journey. This time, the angels led him not into the depths of the earth or the courts of heaven, but across the expanse of creation itself. He would be shown the secrets of the cosmos, the precise order that governs the universe, and the obedience of the stars and planets to the commands of the Most High. The angel Uriel, whose name means "God is my light," served as Enoch's guide. Uriel was the keeper of celestial knowledge, the one who understood the movements of the heavenly bodies and the laws that governed them. He took Enoch to the edges of the earth, to the places where the sun rises and sets, where the moon changes its phases, and where the stars follow their appointed paths. "Enoch," Uriel said, "what you are about to see is the foundation of time itself. The sun, the moon, and the stars are not random. They are instruments of order, markers of seasons, signs of the Creator's precision. Watch and understand." The first thing Uriel showed Enoch was the path of the sun. The sun, a massive sphere of light and heat, did not simply rise in the east and set in the west. It followed a specific course, moving through a series of gates or portals in the sky. There were 6 gates in the east and 6 in the west, 12 in total, and the sun passed through different gates depending on the time of year. In the summer, the sun rose through the northernmost gates, resulting in longer days and shorter nights. In the winter, it rose through the southernmost gates, producing shorter days and longer nights. At the equinoxes in spring and autumn, the sun rose through the central gates, creating days and nights of equal length. Uriel explained that this pattern was established by the Creator at the foundation of the world. The sun never deviated from its path. It did not rise late or set early. It fulfilled its course with perfect obedience, marking the passage of days, months, and years. "The sun is a testimony to the faithfulness of God," Uriel said. "It does what it was created to do without question, without rebellion. Humanity would do well to learn from the sun." Next, Uriel showed Enoch the path of the moon. The moon, unlike the sun, changed its appearance throughout the month. It waxed from a thin crescent to a full circle and then waned back to darkness. This cycle took either 29 or 30 days, depending on the month. The moon's light, Uriel explained, was not its own. It reflected the light of the sun. As the moon moved through its orbit, the amount of sunlight it reflected changed, creating the phases that humans observed. The new moon occurred when the moon was between the Earth and the sun, invisible because its illuminated side faced away. The full moon occurred when the Earth was between the sun and the moon, and the entire face of the moon was lit. Uriel emphasized that the moon's cycle was not random. It was designed to mark the months and to regulate the tides. The moon obeyed the laws given to it by the Creator, never straying from its appointed course. The moon is a reminder that even reflected light serves a purpose, Uriel said. It does not generate its own glory, but it faithfully displays the glory it receives. Then Uriel took Enoch to observe the stars. There were countless stars, more than Enoch could number, each one following its own path through the sky. The stars were organized into constellations, patterns that repeated year after year. They marked the seasons and guided travelers. Uriel revealed something surprising. Some of the stars had names. Not just any names, but names given to them by the Most High. Each star had a purpose, a role to play in the grand design of creation. They were not simply decorations in the night sky. They were part of a cosmic order. But not all stars obeyed. Uriel pointed to certain stars that had strayed from their paths. These rebellious stars, like the Watchers, had abandoned the course assigned to them. And like the Watchers, they were judged. They were cast into the abyss, bound until the day of final judgment. The rebellion of the stars is a reflection of the rebellion of the angels, Uriel explained. When order is violated, when boundaries are crossed, judgment follows. This is true for angels, for stars, and for humanity. Share this video if the connection between the rebellion of angels and the rebellion of stars fascinates you. The Book of Enoch presents a universe where spiritual and physical realities are interconnected. What happens in the heavens affects what happens on earth, and vice versa. Uriel then explained the calendar to Enoch. The year, he said, consisted of exactly 364 days. This was divided into 4 equal seasons, each with 91 days. Each season had 3 months, and each month had 30 or 31 days. The calendar was perfectly balanced with no need for adjustments or corrections. This calendar was different from the lunar calendar that many cultures used, which was based on the cycles of the moon. The lunar calendar had months of 29 or 30 days, totaling 354 days in a year. This created a discrepancy with the solar year, requiring the addition of extra days to keep the calendar aligned with the seasons. Uriel insisted that the solar calendar of 364 days was the true calendar, ordained by God. It was based on the movements of the sun and the stars, which were more reliable than the moon. Those who followed the lunar calendar, Uriel warned, were being led astray. They were losing track of the appointed times for festivals and observances. Time itself is sacred, Uriel said. The festivals appointed by the Most High must be observed at the correct times. If humanity loses track of the calendar, they will lose track of their relationship with God. This teaching about the calendar has significant implications. The Book of Enoch suggests that there is a correct way to measure time, a divinely ordained system that should not be altered by human tradition. This became a point of contention in later Jewish history as different groups debated whether to follow the solar calendar of Enoch or the lunar calendar used by the temple authorities. Enoch also learned about the winds. Uriel showed him storehouses where the winds were kept, chambers where the forces of nature awaited the command to be released. There were 4 primary winds corresponding to the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. Each wind had a specific purpose. Some brought rain and fertility, others brought heat and dryness. Some were gentle, while others were violent and destructive. The winds, like the sun and moon and stars, obeyed the commands of the Most High. They did not blow randomly. They were directed, controlled, sent forth at the appointed times to accomplish the purposes of God. Enoch saw the storehouses of snow and hail, the reservoirs of rain, the chambers where lightning and thunder were kept. All of these natural phenomena, which humans often took for granted or attributed to chance, were actually part of a carefully managed system. Nothing in creation was accidental. Like this video if you find comfort in the idea that the universe is ordered and intentional. In a world that often feels chaotic, the Book of Enoch provides a vision of cosmic structure, where even the winds and rains follow divine law. He showed him the pillars upon which the world rested, massive structures that supported the foundations of creation. He showed him the boundaries beyond which no living thing could pass, the edges of the habitable world where the heavens met the earth. These places were both beautiful and terrifying. There were rivers of fire, mountains made of precious stones, valleys filled with eternal flames. There were regions of perpetual darkness and regions of endless light. Enoch saw the full spectrum of creation, from the heights of heaven to the depths of the abyss. One of the most remarkable things Uriel showed Enoch was the tree of life. This was a tree of extraordinary beauty, with fruit that glowed like gold. It was located in a sacred place, guarded by angels. Uriel explained that this tree had been in the Garden of Eden, but after humanity's fall, it was removed and placed in a location where humans could not reach it. On the day of restoration, Uriel said, "This tree will be given to the righteous. They will eat of its fruit and live forever. Death will be no more." Enoch marveled at the tree. It was a symbol of hope, a promise that the brokenness of the world would one day be healed. The curse that came through Adam and Eve's disobedience would be reversed. The righteous would be restored to the paradise that was lost. Comment below if the vision of the Tree of Life resonates with you. This is not just an ancient myth. It is a promise that appears throughout Scripture, culminating in the Book of Revelation, where the Tree of Life is restored in the new heaven and new. Enoch's journey through the cosmos was not just educational, it was transformational. He saw that the universe was not a cold, impersonal machine. It was a creation infused with purpose, guided by the hand of the Almighty. Every star, every wind, every drop of rain had a role to play, and humanity, though small and flawed, was part of this grand design. But Enoch also understood that this order was fragile. The rebellion of the Watchers, the corruption of humanity, the birth of the Nephilim, all of these had disrupted the harmony of creation. The flood would cleanse the earth, but the underlying tension between order and chaos, between obedience and rebellion, would remain. The secrets of the cosmos were a reminder that God was in control, but they were also a warning. When boundaries are crossed, when order is violated, when creation is corrupted, judgment follows. The sun and moon and stars obey the Most High. The winds and rains follow His commands. Humanity must learn to do the same. Chapter 10. The Son of Man revealed after Enoch had witnessed the secrets of the cosmos and understood the order of creation. The angels took him deeper still into the mysteries of heaven. He was about to see something that would change his understanding of everything. He would be shown the Son of Man, the one who would come to judge all of creation and establish an eternal kingdom of righteousness. The vision began with Enoch being transported to a place of overwhelming glory. He saw a throne, the same throne he had seen before, surrounded by fire and light. But this time, his attention was drawn not to the throne itself, but to the one standing beside it. There was a figure, a being whose appearance was like that of a man, but whose presence radiated authority and power beyond anything human. His face shone like the sun, his garments were whiter than snow, and around him were multitudes of angels, bowing and singing praises. Enoch asked the angel guiding him, "Who is this?" The angel replied, "This is the Son of Man, the chosen one, the anointed. He was with the Most High before the world was created. He is the one who will judge all things and establish the kingdom that will never end." Enoch was stunned. This was not an angel. This was not a prophet. This was someone who existed before creation. Someone who shared in the authority of the Most High. The Son of Man was both divine and connected to humanity. He was the bridge between heaven and earth. The angel continued, "The Son of Man has been hidden until now, kept secret by the Most High. But he will be revealed in the last days. He will come with power and great glory. He will judge the kings and the mighty. He will vindicate the righteous, and he will destroy the wicked." Enoch watched as the Son of Man opened the heavenly books, the records where every deed of every person was written. He saw the righteous called forward, their names found in the Book of Life. The Son of Man welcomed them, saying, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you." But then Enoch saw the wicked brought before the throne. They tried to hide, to plead, to make excuses, but there was nowhere to run. Their deeds were exposed. The heavenly books documented everything they had done, every act of violence, every word of blasphemy, every moment of rebellion. The Son of Man pronounced judgment. "Depart from me, you who are cursed. You knew the truth but rejected it. You had the opportunity to repent but refused. Now you will face the consequences of your choices." The wicked were taken away, cast into the abyss where the fallen angels were already imprisoned. There was no mercy, no second chance. The judgment was final. Enoch realized something profound. The Son of Man was not just a judge. He was also the defender of the righteous. He stood between them and the forces of evil. He was their advocate, their protector, their hope. Without him, the righteous would have no one to vindicate them. But with him, justice was guaranteed. Subscribe now, because what we are about to uncover reveals the identity of the Son of Man and why this figure has been debated for thousands of years. Early Christians identified the Son of Man with Jesus Christ, seeing in this vision a prophecy of the Messiah who would come to save and judge. But Jewish scholars have different interpretations. Who is the Son of Man? The answer shapes how we understand the entire message of the Book of Enoch. The vision continued. Enoch saw the Son of Man not only judging but also ruling. After the judgment was complete, a new era began. The earth was transformed, renewed, made perfect. The righteous lived in peace, walking in the light of the Son of Man. There was no more pain, no more suffering, no more death. Everything was as it was meant to be. The Son of Man sat on a throne of glory, and all of creation bowed before him, not out of fear, but out of reverence and love. He was the rightful king, the one who had defeated evil and established justice. His kingdom would never end. Enoch saw that the Son of Man had a unique relationship with the Most High. They were distinct, yet united. The Son of Man acted with the authority of the Father, carrying out his will, executing his judgments, establishing his kingdom. This unity in distinction was a mystery that Enoch could not fully comprehend, but he understood that it was central to the nature of God. The angel explained further, the Son of Man was chosen before the creation of the world. He was set apart for this purpose, to be the Redeemer and Judge of all things. He will bring light to the nations and hope to the righteous. Through him, the purposes of the Most High will be fulfilled. Enoch also learned that the Son of Man would suffer. This was a surprising revelation. How could one so glorious, so powerful, experience suffering? But the angel made it clear. The Son of Man would take on the sins of the world. He would bear the consequences of humanity's rebellion. Through his suffering, he would provide a way for the righteous to be saved. This theme of a suffering Redeemer appears throughout the Book of Enoch, though it is not always explicit. The Son of Man is both the triumphant judge and the sacrificial lamb. He defeats evil not just through power, but through sacrifice. This dual role makes him unique among all beings. Enoch saw visions of the future, moments when the Son of Man would walk among humans. he would teach, heal, and reveal the ways of God. He would be rejected by many, hated by the powerful, betrayed by those close to him, but he would remain faithful to his mission, even unto death. And after death, he would rise. The grave would not hold him. He would conquer death itself, demonstrating that the power of the Most High was greater than any force of darkness. His resurrection would be the proof that everything he taught was true, that his claims were valid, that his authority was real. Like this video if the vision of the Son of Man as both Judge and Redeemer moves you. This is not just a story about power. It is a story about love, about a God who cares so deeply for his creation that he sends a Redeemer to rescue it. Enoch also saw the enemies of the Son of Man. These were not just human opponents. They included spiritual forces, demons, the spirits of the Nephilim, and even the fallen angels who remained bound in darkness. All of them opposed the work of the Son of Man, seeking to prevent his kingdom from being established. But none of them could succeed. The Son of Man was victorious over every enemy. He bound the strong man and plundered his house. He cast out demons with a word. He broke the chains of those held captive by sin. He was, in every sense, the liberator. The vision reached its climax with a scene of universal worship. Every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth bowed before the Son of Man. Every tongue confessed his name. Every knee bent in acknowledgement of his lordship. This was not forced submission. It was the natural response to encountering ultimate truth and goodness. The angel said to Enoch, "Write down what you have seen. This vision is for future generations. They need to know that the Son of Man is coming. They need to prepare. They need to live righteously because he will judge with perfect justice." Enoch understood the weight of this task. He was being entrusted with a message that would shape the faith of millions. The vision of the Son of Man was not just a prediction, it was a promise. No matter how dark the world became, no matter how powerful evil seemed, the Son of Man would come. He would set things right. He would establish a kingdom of justice and peace that would never end. Comment below with your interpretation of the Son of Man. Do you see this as a prophecy of Jesus, or do you interpret it differently? The Book of Enoch has been read by countless people across thousands of years, and its vision of the Son of Man continues to inspire and challenge. Enoch's vision of the Son of Man also included a warning. Not everyone would welcome his coming. The kings and the mighty, those who would use their power to oppress the righteous, would tremble before him. They would beg for mercy, but none would be given. Their time to repent had passed. Now they would face the consequences of their actions. But the righteous, those who had remained faithful despite suffering and persecution, would be vindicated. They would see their oppressors judged. They would inherit the earth. They would walk in the light of the Son of Man forever. Their faithfulness would be rewarded. Their suffering would be acknowledged, and their hope would be fulfilled. The vision of the Son of Man was both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying for those who had rejected God and lived wickedly, comforting for those who had trusted in the promises of the Most High. It was a vision that demanded a response. Would you side with the righteous or with the wicked? Would you prepare for the coming of the Son of Man, or would you ignore the warning? Enoch left this vision changed. He had seen the future. He knew how the story would end, and he understood that his role was to write it down, to preserve it, so that when the Son of Man did appear, people would recognize him. They would know that this was the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy, the realization of the promise given to Enoch so long ago. Chapter 11. Visions of Paradise and Torment. After the revelation of the Son of Man, the angel took Enoch to see the destinations awaiting humanity. He would witness both paradise and torment, the eternal dwelling places of the righteous and the wicked. These were not abstract concepts, they were real locations prepared by the Most High for those who would inherit them. The first place Enoch was shown was the dwelling of the righteous. It was a garden of extraordinary beauty, unlike anything on earth. Trees of every kind grew there, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed with inner light. Rivers of crystal clear water flowed through the garden, and the air itself seemed alive with peace and joy. The righteous walked through this garden, their faces radiant, their bodies free from pain or weariness. They sang praises to the Most High, their voices blending into a harmony that resonated through the entire place. There was no conflict here, no jealousy, no fear. Everyone lived in perfect communion with God and with each other. Enoch asked the angel guiding him, "What is this place?" The angel replied, "This is the dwelling prepared for the righteous, those who remained faithful to the Most High despite the corruption of the world. Here they will live forever in peace and joy. Death will never touch them again. Suffering is unknown here. This is the reward for those who endured." Enoch saw individuals he recognized, people he had known in life who had walked righteously. They greeted him with joy, thanking God for bringing them to this place. They spoke of the trials they had faced on earth, the persecution, the hardship, but they said that all of it was worth it. The glory of this place far outweighed any suffering they had experienced. One of the righteous said to Enoch, "Tell those who still live on earth that the struggle is temporary, but the reward is eternal. Encourage them to remain faithful no matter what comes. This place, this paradise, is waiting for them." Enoch also saw the tree of life, the same tree Uriel had shown him earlier. It stood at the center of the garden, its branches spreading wide, its fruit accessible to all the righteous. The angel explained that those who ate of this fruit would live forever. The curse of death, which had entered the world through Adam and Eve's disobedience, was completely reversed here. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement. The vision of paradise is not just a promise for the distant future. It is a reality that shapes how we live today. Knowing that this reward awaits gives meaning to every act of faithfulness, every moment of obedience. But the vision did not end with paradise. The angels also took Enoch to see the place prepared for the wicked. This was a realm of darkness and torment, a place where those who had rejected God would face the consequences of their choices. The first thing Enoch noticed was the absence of light. While paradise was radiant, this place was shrouded in darkness. Not the darkness of night, which is temporary and can be pierced by a flame, but an oppressive, suffocating darkness that seemed to have weight and substance. He heard screams, cries of anguish echoed through the darkness. People who had lived for themselves, who had oppressed the righteous, who had embraced wickedness, were now experiencing the full reality of separation from God. They had chosen to live without Him on earth, and now they were getting exactly what they chose for eternity. The angel said, "This is the place of torment, prepared for those who rejected the Most High. Here there is no peace, no comfort, no hope. They are fully aware of their situation. They remember their choices, and they understand that this is justice." Enoch saw the wicked pleading for mercy, but no one answered. They begged for water, but none was given. They cried out for relief, but their suffering did not diminish. The angel explained that this was not cruelty, it was consequence. They had spent their lives pursuing their own desires, ignoring the warnings, rejecting every opportunity to repent. Now they were reaping what they had sown. Enoch also saw that the place of torment had different levels. Some suffered more than others, depending on the severity of their sins. Those who had been merely indifferent to God experienced one level of punishment. Those who had actively opposed God, who had persecuted the righteous, who had led others into sin, experienced a far worse fate. There was a section reserved for the fallen angels. Enoch saw the watchers bound in chains, waiting for the final judgment. They were fully conscious, aware of their surroundings, tormented by the knowledge of what they had lost. They had once stood in the presence of God, singing praises with the heavenly hosts. Now they were imprisoned in darkness, awaiting the day when they would be cast into the lake of fire. Azazel, the leader of the rebellion who had taught humanity the forbidden arts, was isolated in his own prison. the angel explained that his punishment was greater than the others because his influence had been more destructive. He had corrupted humanity so thoroughly that his name became synonymous with sin itself. Like this video, if the vision of judgment makes you uncomfortable, it should. The Book of Enoch does not shy away from the reality of divine justice. It presents a God who is both loving and righteous, who offers mercy but also enforces consequences when that mercy is rejected. Enoch also learned about Sheol, the holding place for the spirits of the dead before the final judgment. Sheol had 4 compartments. The first was for the righteous who had died before the coming of the Redeemer. They rested in peace, awaiting the day of resurrection. The second was for those who had died in sin but had some measure of righteousness. Their fate was uncertain, subject to the final judgment. The third compartment was for the wicked who had suffered on earth. They experienced some relief from their earthly torment, but they still awaited judgment. The fourth compartment was for the wicked who had prospered on earth, who had lived in luxury while oppressing the righteous. They suffered greatly in Sheol as a preview of the eternal torment that awaited them. This structure of Sheol explained why death was not the end. It was a transition, a waiting period before the final judgment, when every person would be assigned to their eternal destination. The righteous would go to paradise, the wicked to torment, and there would be no changing places after that. The angel also showed Enoch the lake of fire, the final destination for the fallen angels and for those humans who had completely rejected God. This was not the same as Sheol or the temporary place of torment. This was the eternal prison, a place of fire and sulfur where the wicked would suffer forever, fully conscious, without hope of relief or escape. Enoch saw the future final judgment, when the Son of Man would open the heavenly books and pronounce the fate of every person. Those whose names were found in the book of life would enter paradise. Those whose names were not found would be cast into the lake of fire. There would be no appeals, no second chances. The judgment would be final and irreversible. Comment below if you struggle with the concept of eternal punishment. This is one of the most difficult aspects of the Book of Enoch and of biblical theology in general. How can a loving God allow eternal suffering? The text does not provide a complete answer, but it emphasizes that the punishment is not arbitrary. It is the natural consequence of a life spent rejecting God. Those in torment chose to be there by the way they lived. They valued their own desires above righteousness, and now they experience the full reality of life without God. Enoch also saw that the righteous would witness the judgment of the wicked. This was not for the purpose of gloating or revenge. It was for vindication. The righteous had suffered on earth, often at the hands of the wicked. They had been mocked for their faith, persecuted for their obedience, sometimes killed for their righteousness. Now they would see that God had not forgotten. Justice was being served. Their suffering had not been meaningless. The vision of paradise and torment left Enoch deeply moved. He understood that the choices people made in life had eternal consequences. There was no neutrality. Everyone would end up in one place or the other, and the basis for that assignment was clear: faithfulness to God and obedience to His ways, or rejection of God and pursuit of wickedness. The angel said to Enoch, "Write down what you have seen. Let future generations know that paradise awaits the righteous and torment awaits the wicked. Let them understand that this life is the time to choose. After death, the choice is fixed. Encourage the righteous to persevere. Warn the wicked to repent." Enoch took this command seriously. He understood that his writings were not just historical records. They were prophetic warnings meant to influence how people lived. The vision of paradise was meant to give hope and encouragement. The vision of torment was meant to provoke repentance and change. As Enoch prepared to leave this part of his journey, he reflected on everything he had seen: the rebellion of the Watchers, the corruption of humanity, the flood, the binding of the fallen angels, the secrets of the cosmos, the revelation of the Son of Man, and now the destinations of paradise and torment. All of it pointed to one truth: God is just, His judgments are righteous, and every person will receive what they deserve. But there was also mercy woven throughout. The flood, while destructive, preserved a righteous remnant. The binding of the watchers prevented further corruption. The revelation of the Son of Man provided hope for redemption, and the vision of paradise promised that faithfulness would be rewarded. Even in judgment, there was mercy for those who sought it. Chapter 12. The great flood Fornit. Fornit told Enoch had seen the judgment of the watchers, the secrets of the cosmos, and the visions of paradise and torment. But there was one more major event he needed to witness in his prophetic journey. The great flood that would cleanse the earth and give humanity a fresh start. The angels took Enoch forward in time, showing him visions of what would happen after his own departure from the earth. He saw the corruption continuing to spread. Despite the binding of the watchers and the destruction of many Nephilim, wickedness still dominated human society. The teachings of the fallen angels had taken root. Violence, idolatry, and immorality were everywhere. Enoch saw his great-grandson Noah living as a righteous man in the midst of this corruption. Noah did not participate in the wickedness around him. He remained faithful to God, teaching his children to do the same. But he was largely alone. The world had turned its back on the Creator, and few listened to Noah's warnings. Then Enoch saw the archangel Uriel appearing to Noah with the message from God. "Build an ark, for a flood is coming. The waters will cover the earth and destroy all flesh. But you and your family will be saved." Noah believed the message, even though it seemed impossible. Rain was rare in that region. The idea of a flood covering the entire earth defied logic, but Noah had faith. He began to build the ark according to the specifications given by God. The ark was massive, larger than any ship that had ever been built. It was approximately 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. It had 3 decks, a door on the side, and a window near the top. The structure was designed not for sailing, but for floating. It did not need to go anywhere. It just needed to stay afloat while the waters covered the earth. Noah worked on the ark for years, possibly decades. People mocked him. They asked why he was building a boat so far from any body of water. They laughed at his warnings about a coming flood. They saw him as a fanatic, a fool, wasting his time on a pointless project. But Noah did not stop. He continued to build, day after day, trusting that God's word was true. And as he built, he also preached. He warned people that judgment was coming. He urged them to repent, to turn back to God, to change their ways before it was too late. Few listened. The world was too far gone. People were too entrenched in their wickedness. They had been taught by the watchers that pleasure and power were the highest goods. They had embraced violence and idolatry. They saw no reason to change. Subscribe now, because what happens next reveals both the mercy and the justice of God. The flood was not a random act of destruction. It was a carefully measured response to a specific crisis, and it carried lessons that still apply today. Enoch saw the day when the ark was finally completed. Noah had followed every instruction. The structure was sound, sealed with pitch inside and out to make it waterproof. It was ready. Then God commanded Noah to gather the animals. Pairs of every kind of creature were brought to the ark. Birds, beasts, reptiles, everything that breathed air. The animals came of their own accord, drawn by a divine instinct. Noah did not have to capture them. They simply arrived, walked up the ramp, and entered the ark. Noah's family also entered. His wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. 8 people in total. Out of a population that may have numbered in the millions, only 8 were counted righteous enough to be saved. Once everyone and everything was inside, God himself sealed the door. This was significant. Noah did not close the door. God did. This meant that once it was shut, no one else could enter. The time for mercy had passed. Judgment was about to begin. For 7 days, nothing happened. The sky was clear. The ground was dry. People outside the ark continued to mock. They thought Noah was even more foolish than before. He had built this enormous structure, filled it with animals, and sealed himself inside. And now he just sat there, waiting for a flood that would never come. But on the seventh day, the sky darkened. Clouds began to gather, thick and ominous. Thunder rumbled in the distance. And then the rain started. At first, it was just a drizzle. People were curious but not alarmed. Rain was unusual, but it happened occasionally. But the drizzle became a downpour, and the downpour became a deluge. Water fell from the sky in sheets, more water than anyone had ever seen. At the same time, the fountains of the deep burst open. Underground reservoirs of water erupted, sending geysers shooting into the air. The ground shook, cracks appeared in the earth, and water poured out from below. The two sources of water, from above and from below, combined to create a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. Rivers overflowed. Lakes expanded. The seas surged inland. Within hours, the low-lying areas were underwater. People began to panic. They ran to higher ground, but the water followed. They climbed trees, but the water rose higher. They pounded on the door of the ark, begging to be let in. But the door was sealed by God. No one could open it. Enoch watched as the world he had known disappeared beneath the waters. Cities were submerged. Forests were drowned. The mountains themselves were covered. Everything that breathed air perished. Humans, animals, the remaining Nephilim, all of them were swept away. Like this video, if the image of the flood is both terrifying and awe-inspiring, this was not a natural disaster. This was divine intervention, a deliberate act to cleanse the earth of corruption. The scale of the destruction underscores the severity of the sin that provoked it. The rain continued for 40 days and 40 nights. By the time it stopped, the entire earth was covered with water. The highest mountains were submerged under more than 20 feet of water. There was no dry land anywhere. The world had become a vast ocean, with only the ark floating on its surface. Inside the ark, Noah and his family waited. They could hear the rain pounding on the roof. They could feel the ark rocking as the waters surged. But they were safe. The structure held. The pitch sealed every seam. God had designed the ark perfectly, and it fulfilled its purpose. The animals too were calm. Despite being confined in close quarters, they did not fight or panic. A supernatural peace rested over the entire ark. This was a place of refuge, a sanctuary in the midst of judgment. Enoch saw the waters remaining for over a year. Slowly, gradually, they began to recede. The rain had stopped, but it took months for the water to drain away. The ark drifted, carried by the currents, until finally it came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah opened the window and looked out. Water still covered everything. He sent out a raven, which flew back and forth, finding no place to land. Then he sent out a dove. It returned because there was no dry ground. 7 days later, he sent the dove out again. This time it returned with a freshly plucked olive leaf, a sign that the waters were receding and vegetation was beginning to reappear. 7 days after that, Noah sent the dove out a third time. It did not return. This meant it had found a place to nest. Dry land was finally appearing. God commanded Noah to open the door and come out. Noah, his family, and all the animals exited the ark and stepped onto a transformed world. The earth was clean. The corruption was gone. The Nephilim were no more. The wicked who had rejected God's warnings were dead. A new chapter in human history was beginning. The first thing Noah did was build an altar and offer a sacrifice to God. He took some of the clean animals and birds and presented them as a burnt offering, an act of worship and thanksgiving. God accepted the sacrifice and made a covenant with Noah. Enoch saw God promise that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. The rainbow appeared in the sky as a sign of this covenant, a reminder that despite humanity's continued sinfulness, God would preserve the earth until the final judgment. Comment below if the story of the flood raises questions for you. Did it really happen? Is it a literal historical event or a symbolic narrative? These questions have been debated for centuries. The Book of Enoch presents it as a real event, a divine intervention in response to a specific crisis. But regardless of how we interpret it, the message is clear. Sin has consequences, God's judgment is real, and mercy is available for those who seek it. The flood was a reset, but it was not a permanent solution. Noah and his descendants would still struggle with sin. The spirits of the Nephilim still lingered on the earth, causing trouble. The knowledge taught by the Watchers had been passed down through the generations. Humanity would continue to face temptation, to battle wickedness, to choose between righteousness and rebellion. But the flood demonstrated something important. God does not tolerate evil indefinitely. There are limits, there are boundaries. When those boundaries are crossed, judgment comes. The Watchers learned this. The Nephilim learned this. The wicked generation that perished in the flood learned this, and future generations would need to learn it as well. Enoch understood that the flood was not just about the past, it was a warning for the future. Another judgment was coming, not with water but with fire. The final judgment when the Son of Man would appear and establish his eternal kingdom. Those who remained faithful would be saved. Those who rejected God would be destroyed. The pattern established with the flood would repeat on a cosmic scale. Chapter 13, the Animal Visitation of History. After witnessing the flood and its aftermath, Enoch was given another remarkable vision. This one was different from the others. Instead of seeing angels, heavens, or spiritual realities, he saw the entire history of humanity represented through the imagery of animals. This was the animal apocalypse, a symbolic retelling of human events from Adam to the final judgment. Enoch saw a white bull emerge from the earth. This bull represented Adam, the first man. Then a female calf appeared beside him, representing Eve. Together they produced another white bull, Seth, and the generations continued. The early descendants of Adam were depicted as white bulls, symbolizing their relative righteousness compared to later generations. As time passed, Enoch saw the bulls beginning to mix with other types of animals. Some became cows, others became different creatures. This mixing represented the spread of humanity and the increasing diversity, but also the growing corruption. People were straying from the original pattern, adopting new practices, moving away from the purity of the early generations. Then Enoch saw a star fall from heaven. This star represented one of the fallen angels, a watcher. The star walked among the bulls and corrupted them. More stars fell and they too began to interact with the animals on the earth. This was the descent of the Watchers, portrayed symbolically. The unions between the fallen stars and the earthly creatures produced something new and terrifying. Elephants, camels, and donkeys appeared, representing the Nephilim. These were not ordinary animals. They were larger, stronger, more destructive. They began to attack and devour the other creatures, spreading chaos across the land. Enoch saw the righteous bulls crying out to heaven. Their prayers reached the throne of God, and God responded by sending 4 angels, represented as men, to address the crisis. These were Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, the archangels who would execute judgment. One of the angels bound the fallen stars and cast them into the abyss. Another destroyed the elephants, camels, and donkeys, ensuring that the Nephilim were wiped out. The earth was cleansed, but the spirits of the destroyed creatures remained, causing trouble for the animals, representing the demons that would plague humanity. Then Enoch saw the flood. Waters covered the entire earth, and all the animals perished except for one white bull and his family, who were sheltered in a large vessel. This was Noah and the ark. The white bull and 3 young bulls emerged from the vessel after the waters receded, representing Noah and his 3 sons. From these 3 bulls, the earth was repopulated. Different animals appeared, representing the various nations that descended from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Some remained close to the original white bulls, symbolizing the nations that retained knowledge of God. Others wandered far away, becoming wild and unrecognizable, representing nations that abandoned the truth. Enoch saw the animals building a tower, reaching toward heaven. But God came down and confused their languages, scattering them across the earth. This was the Tower of Babel, a human attempt to achieve greatness without God, which ended in judgment and division. Then a special bull appeared, one that was set apart. This bull represented Abraham, the father of the faithful. He was called out from among the other animals and given a promise that from him would come a great nation. Abraham's descendants were depicted as sheep, small and vulnerable compared to the powerful predators around them, but protected by God. The sheep multiplied and faced many challenges. Enoch saw them enslaved by wild animals, representing the Egyptians who oppressed the Israelites. But then a sheep appeared who would lead them out of bondage. This was Moses, guided by God to deliver his people. The sheep wandered in the wilderness, and a ram with a large horn appeared, leading them. This ram was Joshua, who brought the sheep into the land promised to Abraham. But the sheep were not faithful. They began to mix with the wild animals, adopting their practices, worshipping their gods. This was the period of the judges, a cycle of faithfulness and rebellion. Enoch saw shepherds being appointed over the sheep. These shepherds represented the kings of Israel. Some were good, protecting the flock. Others were wicked, exploiting the sheep for their own gain. Under the wicked shepherds, the sheep suffered greatly. Then Enoch saw wolves and other predators attacking the sheep. These were the foreign nations: Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, each conquering the sheep and scattering them. The temple, represented as a house where the sheep gathered to worship, was destroyed. The sheep were carried into exile. But even in exile, some sheep remained faithful. They cried out to God, and God heard them. Enoch saw a remnant returning to rebuild the house, though it was not as glorious as the first. This was the return from Babylonian exile and the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Subscribe now if you are fascinated by how the Book of Enoch uses animal symbolism to tell the story of human history. This method of teaching through allegory was common in ancient literature, but the precision and scope of Enoch's vision are remarkable. Enoch's vision continued into the future, beyond the time of the exile. He saw a ram with a large horn arise among the sheep. This ram fought against the predators and won significant victories. Scholars debate who this ram represents. Some suggest Judas Maccabeus, the Jewish leader who led a successful revolt against Greek oppression in the 2nd century BC. But then Enoch saw something even more significant. A lamb appeared, a lamb unlike any other. This lamb was white, pure, and radiated light. Despite being small and vulnerable, this lamb had authority. The other sheep began to follow the lamb, and those who followed became transformed. They too became white and radiant, but not all the sheep followed the lamb. Many rejected him. The shepherds, the religious and political leaders, opposed the lamb. They conspired against him, seeking to destroy him. And for a time, it appeared that they succeeded. The lamb was killed. But the death of the lamb was not the end. Enoch saw the lamb rise again, alive and more glorious than before. And he saw that the lamb was not merely a lamb. He was also the Son of Man, the judge and redeemer whose coming Enoch had witnessed in earlier visions. This lamb, whom early Christians identified with Jesus Christ, would bring salvation to the sheep who followed him. He would defeat the predators, judge the wicked shepherds, and establish a kingdom where the sheep could live in peace. Enoch saw the final judgment portrayed through the animals. The wicked shepherds, those who had abused the sheep, were brought before a throne and judged. They were found guilty and cast into a fiery abyss. The predators, the nations that had oppressed the sheep, were also judged and destroyed. Then Enoch saw a new house being built, far more glorious than any that had come before. This represented the New Jerusalem, the eternal dwelling place of God among his people. All the sheep entered this house, and they were transformed. They became white, radiant, perfect. They lived in the presence of the Most High, and there was no more suffering, no more fear. Like this video, if the vision of the Lamb resonates with you. For Christians, this is a clear prophecy of Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. For others, it may represent a future Redeemer yet to come. But the message is clear. Salvation comes through the Lamb, and those who follow him will be vindicated. Enoch also saw wild animals, bulls, and other creatures who had not been part of the sheep joining them in the new house. This represented the inclusion of the Gentiles, people from all nations who would come to worship the God of Israel. The kingdom of God was not limited to one ethnic group. It was open to all who would accept the Lamb. The animal apocalypse ended with a scene of universal peace. The sheep lived without fear. The predators were gone. The wicked shepherds were judged, and the Lamb reigned over all. This was the fulfillment of every promise, the realization of every hope, the vindication of every righteous person who had suffered. Comment below if you see parallels between Enoch's animal vision and the history of Israel as recorded in the Bible. The vision covers the same events from creation to the flood, from the patriarchs to the exile, from the return to the coming of the Lamb. It is a symbolic retelling that provides commentary on the spiritual significance of these events. The animal apocalypse served a specific purpose. It reassured the faithful that God was in control of history. Despite the rise and fall of empires, despite the suffering of the righteous, despite the apparent victory of evil, God's plan was unfolding. The Lamb would come, judgment would be executed, and the righteous would inherit the kingdom. For Enoch, this vision confirmed everything he had already seen: the rebellion of the Watchers, the corruption of humanity, the flood, the coming of the Son of Man. All of it was part of a larger narrative. History was not random, it was moving toward a predetermined goal, the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. And Enoch's role in all of this was to write it down, to preserve the vision for future generations. The animal apocalypse was not just a history lesson. It was a prophetic roadmap, showing where humanity had been and where it was going. Those who understood the vision could position themselves on the right side of history, aligning with the Lamb and preparing for the coming kingdom. Chapter 14. The 10 weeks of time. Enoch's visions continued to unfold, revealing more about the future and God's plan for humanity. The angels showed him a structure for understanding history, divided into 10 periods called weeks. Each week represented a significant era, and together they spanned from creation to the final judgment and beyond. This vision of the 10 weeks provided a framework for comprehending the sweep of human history and the inevitable unfolding of divine purpose. Enoch listened carefully as the angel explained each week. The first week began with Enoch himself. He was born in the 7th generation from Adam, a man of righteousness in an age of growing corruption. The first week covered the time from creation through the early generations of humanity, when the earth was still relatively pure, before the descent of the Watchers. The second week was marked by great wickedness. This was the era when the Watchers descended, when the Nephilim were born, when violence and idolatry filled the earth. It culminated in the Great Flood, which cleansed the world and allowed humanity to start again. A righteous man, Noah, was saved, and through him the earth was repopulated. The third week saw the continuation of humanity after the flood. Abraham appeared during this week, a man chosen by God to be the father of many nations. Through Abraham, a special people would be set apart, a nation that would carry the knowledge of the true God. This week was characterized by the establishment of covenant relationships between God and his people. The fourth week brought the giving of the law. Moses appeared on Mount Sinai and received the commandments from God. The law provided structure, guidance, and a clear understanding of righteousness. It revealed God's standards and showed humanity how far they had fallen short. This week also included the conquest of the Promised Land and the establishment of Israel as a nation. The fifth week was dominated by the rise of the temple. Solomon built a magnificent house for God in Jerusalem, a place where the divine presence dwelt among the people. This was a time of glory for Israel, a period when the nation reached its peak of power and influence. But it was also a time when complacency began to set in, when faithfulness started to wane. The sixth week saw the decline and fall of Israel. The nation split into two kingdoms. Prophets arose calling the people back to righteousness, but they were largely ignored. False gods were worshipped, injustice was rampant, and finally judgment came. The temple was destroyed and the people were carried into exile. This was a dark period, a time when it seemed that God had abandoned his people. But the exile was not the end. The seventh week brought a partial restoration. A remnant returned from Babylon and rebuilt the temple, though it was not as glorious as Solomon's. During this week, something else happened that was even more significant. The chosen plant of righteousness appeared. This was a cryptic reference that scholars have debated, but many interpret it as referring to the coming of the Messiah, the Lamb that Enoch had seen in the animal vision. Subscribe now, because the final 3 weeks reveal the ultimate destiny of humanity and the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. The prophecy becomes even more specific and more controversial as it moves toward the end of time. The 8th week was described as a week of righteousness. A sword would be given to the righteous and they would execute judgment on the wicked. This was a time of vindication when those who had suffered for their faithfulness would see justice served. The oppressors would be overthrown, false systems of power would collapse, and righteousness would begin to spread across the earth. Some interpreters see the 8th week as referring to the period after the coming of the Messiah, when the gospel spreads and the kingdom of God advances. Others see it as a future era yet to unfold. The text is deliberately vague, allowing for multiple understandings. The 9th week would witness the revelation of righteous judgment to the whole world. Everything that opposed God would be removed from the earth. This was the beginning of the final transformation, the preparation for the eternal age. The 10th week was the ultimate fulfillment. The great eternal judgment would take place. The first heaven would pass away, and a new heaven would appear. The righteous would shine like stars for all eternity. Evil would be completely eradicated. There would be no more sin, no more suffering, no more death. The universe itself would be transformed into a place where God dwelt fully with his creation. And after the 10th week, the text hints at weeks beyond number, an eternity of goodness where the righteous would live forever in the presence of the Most High. Time as we know it would cease to have meaning. The kingdom of God would be fully established and nothing would ever threaten it again. Enoch absorbed this vision with a mixture of awe and sobering realization. The 10 weeks revealed that history was not random. It was following a divine blueprint. Each era had its purpose, its challenges, its role in the overall plan, and everything was leading toward the final judgment and the eternal kingdom. Like this video, if the structure of the 10 weeks helps you make sense of history, knowing that God has a plan, that everything is unfolding according to his purpose, provides comfort in a chaotic world. We may not understand everything that is happening, but we can trust that God is in control. The angel emphasized to Enoch that he must write down the vision of the 10 weeks so that future generations would understand. People living in the 6th or 7th week might feel discouraged, thinking that evil had triumphed. But the vision of the 10 weeks would remind them that judgment was coming, that righteousness would prevail, and that God's kingdom would be established. This prophetic structure also served a practical purpose. It helped people identify where they were in the timeline. By recognizing the characteristics of their own era, they could anticipate what was coming next. This allowed them to prepare spiritually, to remain faithful even in difficult times, knowing that the ultimate victory was assured. Comment below with your thoughts on which week we might be living in today. Are we in the 7th week, awaiting the full revelation of the Messiah? Are we in the 8th week, where righteousness is beginning to spread? Or are we on the verge of the 9th week, when judgment will be revealed to all? This question has fascinated readers of the Book of Enoch for centuries. Enoch also learned that the transition between weeks was not always smooth. There were periods of overlap, times of great turmoil when the old order was collapsing and the new order was not yet fully established. These transition periods were especially difficult for the righteous. as they faced intense opposition from those who wanted to cling to the old ways. But the angel assured Enoch that the righteous would be protected during these times. They might suffer, they might be persecuted, but they would not be destroyed. God would preserve a remnant, just as he had preserved Noah and his family during the flood. The faithful would survive to see the fulfillment of the promises. The vision of the 10 weeks also addressed a question that had troubled many. Why does God allow evil to persist? Why doesn't he intervene immediately to establish justice? The answer, according to this vision, is that God is working according to a specific timeline. Each week has its purpose. Evil is allowed to continue for a season so that humanity can fully demonstrate its choices, so that the consequences of rebellion can be clearly seen, and so that when judgment finally comes, no one can claim it was premature or unjust. The 10 weeks were a reminder that God's patience should not be mistaken for inaction. He was actively involved in history, guiding events, protecting the righteous, and preparing for the final judgment. And when the time came, his justice would be swift and complete. Enoch left this vision with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that his writings were not just for his own generation. They were for people living in every week, providing guidance, encouragement, and warning. The vision of the 10 weeks was a gift, a window into the divine plan that would help the faithful endure whatever challenges they faced. The 10 weeks also reinforced a central theme of the Book of Enoch. Righteousness will be vindicated, the wicked will be judged, and God's kingdom will be established forever. No matter how dark the present might seem, no matter how powerful evil appeared, the outcome was certain. The righteous would inherit the earth and the wicked would be removed. This was not wishful thinking, it was prophetic certainty, revealed by the angels, confirmed by visions, and recorded for all generations. Enoch's task was to preserve this knowledge so that when the final weeks arrived, people would recognize the signs and be ready. Chapter 15. Enoch Sinal had fulfilled his mission. He had witnessed the rebellion of the Watchers, the corruption of humanity, the judgment of heaven, and the visions of the future. He had carried messages between heaven and earth, written down revelations, and served as the scribe of righteousness. But his time on earth was coming to an end. The book of Genesis tells us simply that Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. But the book of Enoch provides more details about what happened in those final days before his departure. Enoch knew that his time was short. The angels had hinted at it, and he felt it in his spirit. He gathered his family around him, his son Methuselah and his other descendants, and he began to share with them everything he had learned. "My children," Enoch said, "I have been shown things that no ordinary man has seen. I have stood in the throne room of the Most High. I have witnessed the judgment of angels. I have seen the future of humanity. And I have been commanded to write it all down so that you and your descendants will know the truth." Methuselah asked, "Father, what should we do with this knowledge? How should we live?" Enoch replied, "Walk in righteousness. Do not turn to the left or to the right. Obey the commandments of the Most High. Reject the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers taught. Do not practice sorcery or astrology or divination. Trust in God, not in magic or weapons or your own strength. Live simply, honestly, faithfully, and teach your children to do the same." He continued, "A time of judgment is coming. You have heard me speak of the flood. It will happen in the days of Noah, your grandson. Everything on earth will be destroyed except for those who are in the ark. Make sure that Noah remains faithful. Encourage him. Support him. When the time comes for him to build the ark, do not doubt him. God's word is true." Enoch also warned them about the spirits of the Nephilim. Even after the giants are destroyed, their spirits will remain on earth. They will become demons, tormenting humanity, leading people into sin. You must be vigilant. Resist them. Do not give in to their temptations. His family listened carefully, absorbing every word. They knew that Enoch spoke with authority, that he had been chosen by God for a special purpose. They did not fully understand everything he said, but they believed him. Then Enoch spoke about the distant future. A Redeemer is coming. The Son of Man will appear and judge all of creation. He will vindicate the righteous and destroy the wicked. When he comes, you must recognize him. Do not be like those who reject the truth. Embrace him, follow him, and you will inherit eternal life. After Enoch had finished speaking to his family, the angels appeared once again. They said, "Enoch, your work on earth is complete. The Most High is calling you. It is time to come home." Enoch was ready. He had lived a full life, walked faithfully with God, and completed the mission given to him. He said goodbye to his family, blessing each of them, and then, in the presence of his loved ones, he was taken up. The Book of Enoch describes a journey through multiple heavens. Enoch was carried by the angels through the first heaven, where the clouds and atmospheric phenomena reside. He passed through the second heaven, the realm of the stars and planets. He ascended through higher heavens, places of pure spirit and light, until finally he reached the throne room of the Most High. There, in the presence of God, Enoch was transformed. His mortal body was changed. He was no longer limited by flesh. He became something else, a being capable of dwelling in the heavenly realms, a witness who would remain for eternity as a testimony to God's faithfulness. Subscribe now if you want to explore what happened to Enoch after his ascension. Some ancient texts suggest that he was given new responsibilities in heaven, that he became an angel or a heavenly scribe, continuing to record the deeds of humanity and the unfolding of God's plan. Enoch's departure left a legacy. His writings, preserved and passed down through generations, provided guidance and hope to countless people. His example of faithfulness in the midst of corruption inspired others to remain true to God, even when the world around them was falling apart. Methuselah, Enoch's son, became the oldest person recorded in the Bible, living for 969 years. His long life served a purpose. He would witness the continued corruption of humanity, the increasing violence, and the final preparations for the flood. And when he died, it was in the same year that the flood came. His death marked the end of an era and the beginning of the judgment. Noah, Methuselah's grandson, carried forward the legacy of righteousness. He remembered the teachings of his great-grandfather Enoch. When God commanded him to build the ark, he obeyed without hesitation. And when the flood came, he and his family were saved, becoming the ancestors of all humanity after the deluge. The Book of Enoch, the writings that Enoch left behind, continued to be read and studied for centuries. Early Jewish communities treasured it. The Essenes, the group that preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls, included copies of Enoch among their sacred texts. Early Christians quoted from it, seeing in its visions of the Son of Man a prophecy of Jesus Christ. But the book was also controversial. Some religious authorities rejected it, arguing that it contained teachings that contradicted the accepted canon. Others embraced it, seeing it as a valuable source of wisdom and revelation. The debate continues to this day. Like this video, if you believe the Book of Enoch deserves a place in the discussion of biblical and spiritual truth. Whether you view it as inspired scripture or as an important historical and theological document, its influence on religious thought is undeniable. Enoch's final message to humanity can be summed up in a few key points. First, God is real, and he is actively involved in the affairs of the world. He sees everything, judges justly, and will ultimately establish his kingdom. Second, evil has consequences. The Watchers rebelled and were punished. The Nephilim were destroyed. The wicked generation perished in the flood. Those who oppose God will face judgment, and that judgment will be righteous and final. Third, righteousness will be rewarded. The faithful will be vindicated. They will inherit paradise. They will live forever in the presence of the Most High. Their suffering is temporary, but their reward is eternal. Fourth, a Redeemer is coming. The Son of Man will appear, judge the world, and establish an eternal kingdom. Those who follow him will be saved. Those who reject him will be lost. Fifth, we must choose. Every person in every generation faces the same decision. Will we walk with God like Enoch did, or will we follow the path of the watchers and the wicked? The choice we make determines our eternal destiny. Comment below if Enoch's story has impacted you. His journey from a faithful man walking with God to a prophet witnessing the secrets of heaven and the future of humanity is one of the most remarkable narratives in ancient literature. Enoch's ascension was not the end of his story. According to later Jewish and Christian traditions, he continued to serve in heaven. Some texts describe him as an angel, Metatron, the scribe who records the deeds of all people. Others see him as a witness who will return during the final days to testify against the wicked. Regardless of the details, Enoch's legacy is clear. He was faithful, he was obedient, he trusted God, even when he did not fully understand. And because of that faithfulness, he was taken into the presence of the Almighty, bypassing death and entering directly into eternal life. His story is an encouragement to all who struggle to remain righteous in a corrupt world. If Enoch could walk with God in the days before the flood, when the watchers had descended, when the Nephilim roamed the earth, when violence and idolatry were everywhere, then we too can walk with God in our own challenging times. The Book of Enoch ends with a call to action. Write these things down, teach them to your children. Remember the judgments of the Most High, prepare for the coming of the Son of Man. Live righteously, because the day of judgment is near. Enoch's voice, preserved in these ancient writings, continues to speak across the centuries. His visions challenge us. His warnings convict us. His promises encourage us, and his example inspires us to walk faithfully with God, no matter what the world around us looks like. The secrets of the fallen angels have been revealed. The judgment of heaven has been pronounced. The future of humanity has been shown, and the call to righteousness echoes through every generation. Will you respond? Will you walk with God as Enoch did? The choice is yours, but the consequences are eternal.